I remember when I started working.
Well, welcome to Happiness in the City. This is Barbara, and today I'd like to focus our attention on a very important topic, and that is the concept of authority. What is authority? We are dealing with a lot of questions about that very important topic, and I wanted us to focus by first getting a very well written definition from Wikipedia. Authority, okay, and there are several articles, but let's look at this one. Authority is the right to exercise power. Here it is, which can be formalized by a state and exercised by way of judges, appointed executives of government, or the ecclesiastical or priestly appointed representatives of a god or other deities. Authority in the sense of authorization can also mean the right to complete an action or execute an order. So you see here a very precise definition, and I encourage you to read dictionary definitions on that word, to read about philosophical descriptions. We need to talk about authority because the current political language focuses on the word democracy. But democracy is just one way in which selection for those who are to be in authority positions is created. So it's a very misleading way to talk about politics. Some of you know that I'm ABD in political science. ABD means all but dissertation. So I graduated from 3-year program that was very intense and focused on diverse ways to look at authority, local authorities, national, global, technological authority. So in some ways I'm a specialist in that area. And the way the authority is exercised, the way it is shaped, the way it is manifested, has been of great interest to me since I had to deal with authority decisions after I was injured in a car accident. I was at that time connected to the Washington Post. Just happened during a very powerful conflict in Europe between the communist authorities and Polish solidarity, and then America got involved in this. And that meant the whole world got involved in this because in the 80s, America had very powerful influence on the whole world. It's a little bit different now because we have other centers of international influence. But at that time, everything that was happening in the world was between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. So the creation of solidarity, which was a movement of the whole nation, 10 million people in Poland, was a very powerful defiance to the world order at that time. And then I was injured, and before I was sort of like happy-go-lucky person that didn't pay that much attention to authority, just to conversations and flows of support among my friends and family. And then I ended up in a hospital, and it was a very strange transition in my personal life from thinking about authority in terms of governmental interaction to authority about matters of life and death. So before, the entire interplay was about matters of ideologies, what is better, socialism or capitalism. But when I was in this hospital and I was injured, couldn't walk, and I was in total authority of the hospital personnel, I realized that I was missing a very important phenomenon and dimension of authority, and that is who makes decisions about life and death. And this happened 36 years ago, so you see me here in a happy-go-lucky outcome. But at that time, for about a year, I was in this borderline between life and death, not because of my decisions, but because of what doctors would decide. And that was transformative in my entire political thinking. I realized that we have to talk about authority not only in terms of ideologies or political programs, but we have to look at authority that decides who lives and who dies and how. Traditionally, this was the center of authority. In other words, when you read books about historical events, you know that rulers had duty to make sure that people in the realm that they lived were provided for. Kings had duty to provide housing for those who couldn't house themselves, and that was the focus of authority. The focus of authority was to make sure that people live, that the authority doesn't make decisions to destroy lives of those who are under it, unless there was some crime committed, but it had to be really serious, like a crime of murder. But most of the time, the whole focus was to create peace so that people can live. That was the focus, not ideologies, not who will create social programs or write laws, but to make sure that conditions are established that those who are subject to authority can live. So the focus on life was primary. When I was in this hospital, and I won't mention where it was or what the name of it was, because at this point it really is not that relevant, but I realized that my life was endangered because I was pro-American. I was trying to create peace between Russia, Poland, and America, but I believed that at that moment in history, America had favor of God, that God didn't like the communist, atheistic system of government in Russia. So I followed that faith and belief, and I joined with America to bring about peace. And when I was in this hospital, this was a place in which there was focus on healing, but I knew that some of the doctors were trying to help me and some of them tried to harm me because I was pro-American. So I realized that division of ideology entered even spaces that should have been neutral. There's the spaces of sanctuary, traditionally hospitals, were places where anyone from any political side could come in, and then doctors should be neutral on matters to fight for the patient's life, because that's their oath. So I started praying to God at that time very powerfully and asking God for direction on what to do in such circumstances. And things started developing in a very beautiful way. I was brought up to America. I was blessed by a Jesuit priest in a hospital in Seattle. So from the hospital in which I felt my entire being was endangered, I ended up in a hospital, in a Roman Catholic hospital, where the entire focus was on God and life. And that was the beginning of my journey to look at matters of authority from a higher level than ideologies. And I also asked God to bless Seattle for this. Very quickly after this, Microsoft was created, a very blessed company. And I realized that power of divine blessing can reach into creativity, technological development, economy, all of those things that I thought were dependent only on decision making by those who had office authority. So this dimension of authority was created in my life that completely transformed the way I look at governments. And now, as I have been trying to help the governments of the world to get the right vision to go to the future, I realized that the only types of authority I can support is authority that focuses on life first. Life first. Of everybody under that particular office or that particular type of authority. Because if authority focuses on winning elections or winning programs or winning something that is in the agenda, then this division comes in which that authority makes decisions of who lives and who dies. And I think that that should be the realm of God, not human authority. And by the realm of God, I mean authority, human authority, guided by divine love, divine direction, divine presence, and blessed by God. So I think that we have to look at what is happening in the world today from the point of view of authority. Authority is, it is in this particular definition, is connected with the word authorization. Something is authorized and something is created to develop action or to execute an order, pass an order, execute an order. Now, what if that order is against life of a group of people and yet it will still be executed? In authority that is guided by principle to shield life of everybody in that particular realm, that is not, that kind of question will not even arise, because order of death cannot be given. In other words, what Vladimir Lenin did during the Russian Revolution in 1917, 1918 to give order to murder Romanov family, that kind of order would be impossible in authority guided by defense of life. You would have to defend everybody, whether a person is from a royal family or from a peasant family. So Russian Revolution with Lenin and this anti-atheistic communistic way created that division in which authority was both life-saving but also killing in the same body of authorization. In my vision, that would be impossible if the authority would be forbidden to give orders of death. So it's a very different vision, because then that order of life and to shield life would go to all places, hospitals, schools, everywhere. And we are dealing with a lot of violence in the United States of America over people killing other people. And it's a symptom of something that is a much deeper problem. And that is the problem about lack of clarity in authorities of all levels to, first of all, defend life, shield life. I'm in a building in Cambridge in which this principle is not applied, and about 40 women over the last 15 years have been there, died from heart attacks and the pressure from the management, from the authorities, and they kept changing, but their pressure is always the same. And I realized I'm dealing with this situation of authority creating orders that kill, even in the context of buildings and government subsidized buildings. And I was very surprised to witness this. For a long time I didn't know what to do about it, but recently I realized that those people have no sense that they are murdering other people under their authority. And the reason that they have that numbness in them and that indifference is because they are part of that network in which life is not shielded by authority. They're not trained to do it. In my vision of authority, the first thing I would train people running buildings with vulnerable people is to make sure that the person lives. That should be the primary focus. Today, the primary focus is that the person obeys, and if she or he doesn't obey, they just throw them on the street, and most of them die in the street. Those people who were damaged during my time I've been there, many of them didn't die in the building, they died after they were thrown out from the building. But it's the same phenomenon, lack of respect for human life. So how can we impart respect for human life to young kids, to students in grade schools, to students in colleges, to people all around the nation of the United States of America and to the nations all throughout the world? Is we have to make sure that those who have authority are trained to shield life first. And this is a shift in the way we think about politics. But I think that when we have it, we will reconnect with the government in trust, because right now there is no trust, and there's a lot of destruction of the sense of security and safety because of the lack of trust. So let me encourage you to look at the various types of authority, and I found so much written on that on Google search engine. There are other search engines. There are so many books about it. I encourage you to focus on thinking about matters of authority from diverse points of view, and then you make decisions about types of selection of people who should be in the authority. But if there is no knowledge and sophisticated thinking about authority, people who get into those offices may be just selected murderers like Adolf Hitler or many other people who ended up in those governmental authorities and gave orders of mass death. So in order for us to create trust in our own lives, in our neighbors' lives, to recreate a sense of security, safety in schools, in many other situations, fairs, events, we have to re-examine how we think about authority. What should be the nature of authority? How authority should be defined? What should be the qualifications for content of authority? And that should be the focus on our political thinking. And then we train those who are called to be in authority and help to shape them as defenders of life. And when we do that, the entire network of relationships in America and the world gets transformed into relationships in which our hearts can regain feelings of loving ourselves, loving God, loving our neighbors. When there is no sense of security and safety, it's virtually impossible to feel love and affection, because that response of fight and flight within a person's being develops a sense of trauma. And a sense of trauma is blocking loving connections. So when we look at the ways to avert creation of such trauma, and such trauma usually is because of fear for someone's life. If we create a sense of security and safety because the authority is divine and defined as shield of our lives, then loving, affectionate feelings develop and people become good neighbors, and the whole atmosphere is transformed to atmosphere of trust. When we deal with nature, it's a similar situation. Earth today is in a lot of torment, and God keeps sending the messages that we need to take care of Earth. There's overheating. There are all kinds of ways in which the Earth is traumatized. But Earth is a living being, and the foundational problem for the Earth is the Earth feels the trauma of billions of people living in fear. And the creation of trust for life itself in the entire mankind is the first step to create peace in the earth. Because we are children of the earth. Earth and our lives are connected. We are also children of God, but it's kingdom of God. It's a different realm. We always invite the presence of kingdom of God and presence of God on earth, but it doesn't displace earth. It brings in another dimension of being to the earth. So for those of you who are worried about what is happening with those in authority who are dealing with the so-called global warming, we have to look at that authority as authority that should shield life first. And that means also life of all human beings on earth. And when we create relationship of trust among people on earth, then the earth will start calming down too. Thank you so much for listening to my remarks today about this very important topic, and I encourage you to continue thinking and reading about it, and let me know what you come up with. I'll be